I'm Mary Morgan. I am a recently retired Superior Court in the City and County of San Francisco. And I was appointed to the Superior Court about 30 years ago in 1981 by Jerry Brown, the first time he was a governor. And it was quite a to-do because I was the first out lesbian to be appointed a judge any place in the country. Some people said any place in the world. And so when I came out to my family, I was essentially coming out to not only them, but to the entire world. And the day before, it was going to be announced in the press that I was being appointed a judge and the first lesbian judge. I called up my parents and I said, well, I want you to know I'm going to be appointed a judge tomorrow, and it's going to be in the newspapers that I'm a lesbian, and that's part of why the governor is appointing me. And there was a great deal of silence on the other end, and coughing and humming and eyeing, but essentially my parents came around. They weren't thrilled, but they came around, and I began to learn that their main concern was fear of how this would reflect on them, what people would say about them, not just me. And so it was a really good lesson in it's very hard to understand other people's fears when you're afraid yourself, but it's really important, particularly for people who are close to you, to recognize that fear is sometimes just a mask or a cover for something that on the surface is anger or seems like hatred, but that's not necessarily the case. So in about 1980, when we were trying to get the governor to appoint me as a judge, we formed Bay Area Lawyers for Individual Freedom, also known as BALIF. And the whole point of forming BALIF was, number one, to get the governor to appoint lesbians and gays, and only them at the time, to judicial positions. And it was also to protect the rights of LGBT community members and to form coalitions and alliances with other minority bar associations. So this organization that has grown to be so powerful and so diverse and so energetic today was really formed on a shoestring and a whim by about 10 folks who were brave enough to stand up and said, yes, we deserve to have judges from our community just like anybody else. And during my time on the bench, I think initially I was pretty much defined in other people's minds as a lesbian, beginning to end. That's all they really thought about. And it took a long time, to tell you the truth, to get people to see me through a lens other than just my sexuality. For me, I certainly think of myself as a lesbian, but I'm a multidimensional person, just like everyone else. And so there are many things that are important to me, many issues, many causes, many things that I enjoy, and being a lesbian is only part of that. And so it is very important in my work on the bench that I establish myself as, first and foremost, as a competent, hardworking, really excellent jurist, and then everything else would come into play. When I became a judge, there weren't very many out judges who were lesbian or gay, and it felt incredibly lonely. But what was really heartwarming to me is that other people stepped forward and said, I'm so glad you're a judge. Your visibility is so important to me and how I view myself. And so I really appreciate what you're doing, even if it's hard on a day-to-day basis. And so it was a real learning process for me that to bridge the gap from feeling completely alone and isolated to recognizing that there were a lot of other people out there who were like me. They were having experiences just like me, but most important, they loved me and they wanted to support me. I once went and was sort of grand marshal in some gay parade soon after I became a judge in a Midwestern state. And it seemed very scary and lonely because here I was in an open convertible car, and there were hecklers along the way, in addition to people who were cheering. And when we got to a place where people were going to have a rally and give speeches, there were a lot of hecklers and a lot of people holding up signs about how you're going to go to hell. And so I realized when I stood up, the thing that was most important is that how sad it was, how angry those other people were, and how lucky we were that we were joyous and we were happy. And so it always reminded me of something that I heard when I first came out in New York City: an army of lovers can never be defeated. Things do get better, and I'll give you an example from my own life. When I first became a judge, a gay man who was a lawyer left a note on my desk saying, "Joe Blow," that's not his real name, an attorney who wanted to appear in front of you, left me a note saying, "How can I get my case away from that bull dyke?" And of course, the lawyer who initially left the note didn't know that the second lawyer was going to give it to me because he was a gay man. I think of that because times have so changed. And when I retired, there was a wonderful article in the newspaper where the headline was, "Lesbian Judge Retires." The article said nothing else about me being a lesbian. It talked about my legal career and the contributions I had made on the bench. So in my life, things definitely got better, and that will work for young people and older people all over this country. Things are changing. Please trust change and trust yourselves.